Hello and welcome to the Vermont Department of Corrections Connections podcast. I am here with Maria Godleski. She is a probation and parole supervisor out of Burlington, right? And
That's correct.
You are also is it the team leader? Is that the position for?
Section leader.
Section leader for Honor Guard.
That's correct.
All right, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
Today was graduation for the 183rd Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just had graduation. We're here meeting to talk about kind of what Honor Guard is all about. But I want to start by talking about you first and kind of having you explain to us kind of what your path in corrections has looked like.
Sure. So I started at Burlington Probation and Parole almost 25 years ago. I started in an administrative or secretarial position through a temp agency.
Okay.
So I went somewhere to look for a temporary job, and then I was employed for about 2 months when I took the state of Vermont test. So at that time, there was a test to be a state employee, a test to be an administrative staff person,
Okay.
Alphabetizing. And if you buy 500 pencils, how much are you saving per pencil, and that certain stuff that we don't necessarily do. The alphabetizing,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But so then I became a state employee in November of 2000. I was an admin in a couple different titles, and then a community correctional officer, then a probation officer, and then I've been a supervisor for the last almost 15 years.
So you started in St. Johnsbury Burlington.
Burlington.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yep,
Burlington.
I started in St. Johnsbury. You
That's
started in
right.
Burlington
That's
and
right.
stayed right there.
Stayed there. I've been in the same building the whole time.
Okay. And
Yeah.
worked your way up.
Worked my
right
way up. I
so-
had actually in there, I had an interim supervisor job, and then went back to being a PO, and then back to being a supervisor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. What were you doing before corrections?
College.
College? Okay.
Yeah, so there was like a brief period of time. I graduated in December of 98, and I started working for the department in September of 2000. So there was a brief time where I had some odd jobs. I made sandwiches. I sold vacuum cleaners. I worked at a bookstore. But with a sociology degree, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Sure.
And so I needed a job. So I just had jobs, and then I went home in between leases for the summer, and I had temp jobs. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is great. You get paid every week. And you get put someplace, so finding the job isn't hard. Someone else is doing that piece for you. And actually, the Department of Corrections administrative position schedule lined up with coaching rugby. So rugby is my non-work passion, and I'm still playing. And so that worked out for me to be able to play and coach and have a job. And I've been here ever since.
So it worked out. It worked out. It's not one of those like you had the passion beforehand. You kind of
I had interest. I mean, I had a sociology degree with a concentration in crime, law, and justice, and an English minor. So I had an interest in working with people and understanding people better. I'm a lifetime detective fiction, murder, mystery fiction kind of reader watcher. So everything we do every day here for DOC is a bit of a puzzle. Trying to problem solve how we can improve a process or how we can help a person.
Yes.
So I think I had a natural interest in that process.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So it
was a good match, but it was like, somebody was calling it synchronicity. You have this and you have that, and they sort of come together.
Yeah, kind of it all aligned to work out.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a planned...
Yeah, I wasn't seeking out to work here.
Sure.
But it worked out, and I'm very glad that I did.
Yeah. Well, you stuck around for a little while. So,
yeah.
So obviously it must be something that you enjoy.
Yeah, I do.
Awesome. Well, so during that, when did you get into Honor Guard?
So I actually, to back up, is that Honor Guard is an offshoot of Corrections Emergency Response Team. So in 2001, the Department of Corrections decided that they were going to have a statewide tactical team. So they had local emergency response teams, or ALERT, at each facility, and they wanted a statewide team to respond to larger crises, hostage, riot, escape from a facility. So CERT was formed, the Corrections Emergency Response Team, and I joined that. And then the beginning of Honor Guard was all people from CERT.
Okay.
So we were already doing drill and ceremony and marching, riot formations, listening to directions in that way. So we were already doing opening and closing ceremonies for our basic academy for people to come onto the team. So it was a natural fit. We already had uniforms. So we were already working together. So they took people from that team and asked them to be on Honor Guard. So I was the second class to join CERT, and then I was the second wave of people from CERT to join Honor Guard.
Okay.
So I've probably been on honor guard since roughly 2004.
So but it was a natural evolution through the development of a different team, and they were
Correct.
like, "Hey, this is." Was the purpose for honor guard that exists now? Was that the original intent of it?
Yeah, we if we want to get into that piece, that was the same sort of thing. We were looking to add ceremony to our internal graduations, like from the academy, or completions like Cert Basic.
Yep.
And then at that time, the department didn't necessarily have other ceremonies, but we've since been tacked onto the ceremonies that have been added.
Sure.
Right. So rewards and recognition every year to recognize employees who have had outstanding performance, save somebody's life, valor, that sort of thing. So we carry the colors in those ceremonies and graduation. There was briefly a retirement ceremony that was separate from rewards and recognition that we've done.
Yeah.
Last year we did the Corrections Leaders Association conference. So, in Vermont we've done quite a bit.
Okay. Well, we might as well jump right into like all of the things that. So you talked about graduations.
Yep.
Is funerals not a thing, or is?
Yep. So funerals we do. That's probably the two things. I mean, unfortunately, with funerals, that's the two things we do the most.
Okay.
So every year, then whatever number the graduations are, we're here, either here at the Vermont State University in Lyndonville. Previously, we were at the Pavilion in Montpelier next to the State House. Now we're in a different room in that building.
Sure.
But we've done all the graduations since the inception of the team.
Okay.
So, which included a pretty cool 100th Academy in the State House, which was neat because you had to avoid all of the giant chandeliers in that room that hang quite low.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's almost like an obstacle course. I'm trying to get from here to there, but I have to do it without not knocking into all these things on the ceiling.
Right, because we have the flagpoles on the side here, but yours are a little bit longer maybe?
I think they're the same height, but when you think about sometimes you're carrying it up off the floor, or you might be carrying it in a harness around waist high, so that adds that.
Yeah.
And then I'm not that tall, but if somebody's a foot taller than me and then they're carrying a flag, it's even that much higher.
Sure.
Yeah.
What, if you know this, for the people that have where you go to the funerals, where your team goes to the funerals, what are qualifying reasons, or who qualifies for those types of services?
So the commissioner has to approve our attending any funeral.
Okay.
But after that sort of administrative process, it's someone who works currently for the department or retired, and their family chooses to have us present at that service.
Yeah.
And so it could be the internment, where someone's being put into the ground. It could be a church service, a mass that we're at.
Sure.
It could be a celebration of life. Sometimes in Vermont, you're unable to bury people physically because of the winter. So sometimes we're doing something many months after somebody passes. So we've done celebrations of life, and everybody recognizes someone passing in their family or in their culture differently. So every service we've done is completely different what we do. I've even had one for a retired Department of Corrections person where we were about to start the service and they passed me the urn of their loved one and asked me to carry it. So we then on the fly had to make a modification to what we had originally planned to do, but we're there for the family to recognize their loved one's service to the Department of Corrections.
Right.
It is really a 24/7 job, just like our facilities are, that people are always involved in their work, and the people that are drawn to work for corrections are passionate people.
Yes.
And so to be able to recognize someone's service, whether they've been here a short time or they spent their career here or they're retired and now have passed, I think it's important to their families to say that was an important part of their life.
And I guess I never realized that it could be kind of customizable. I always just assumed it was a standard, what you practice is what you do.
Well, I mean, and it also depends. Are we outside on the grass?
Right.
Are we inside a church? Are we inside a non-church building, a community room?
Yeah.
Are we going upstairs? Was the person in a casket or an urn? So there's a lot of variables.
Are there chandeliers?
Yeah, are there chandeliers?
Yep.
Exactly. Is it raining? Is it windy? Is it, Vermont winter? So, where we stage, how many people are present, We've had services where only one officer is gone because the family doesn't want a big
Yep.
representation,
Sure.
but they want someone there. We've had places where people have declined our offer to be there because maybe they want to be more private about their grieving.
Yeah.
It just really all depends, and it's all up to what the family wants. You know, we've been in a lot of funeral homes and the logistics in there and how people, you know, just when people are deciding how it's going to be for their loved one, we're working around their wishes.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, because it's that's
Yes.
a very intimate
absolutely
thing that's happening.
So, and also someone might be telling us one thing on the phone and we get there and then they ask us to do something different.
Right.
Which we're willing to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does the standardized, so for people on the team, so you have an event that you're going to do. What are some things, and specifically I'm leaning towards uniform and or equipment or things like that you have or are responsible for as a team member?
Yeah, so, I mean, every person has a bag with their gear. So we have patent leather shoes, dress pants that are black with a gray stripe. You'll see my shirt here. We have jackets with the Department of Corrections patches and corrections pins on them. We have a woven Stetson-style hat, so people might identify that more with like state trooper with
Yes.
the wide brim.
Yep.
And then patent leather belt and cross strap on there. And then, so everyone has their personal issued uniform.
Yes.
And then we have flags, harnesses, bases for when we do services or ceremonies where we would be doing the colors.
Okay. And for those types of ceremonies, what are the flags in which you bring to that event?
Yep. So we have the American flag, we have the state of Vermont flag, and then we have an additional flag that is the Department of Corrections flag that is gray field with black fringe, and then the state of Vermont seal on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we have that for, like today, we had graduation, so we had 3 flag bearers, to do the ceremony, and we're posting 3 flags.
Okay. Is there I don't want to say like a rank system involved in that special team, but is there kind of like an understanding of kind of who gives the commands, or like is there a structure to who does what?
So in our practices, I force everybody to practice, because on any given day, it could be the 3 junior-most members
Sure.
that are deployed to an event based on who is available. Sometimes we have 2 events on the same day. So everybody is required to practice to try out their voice in terms of calling commands. But usually it's a more senior person that feels more comfortable. They've had more practice to call the commands for all the facing movements. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd get towards where you have silent and you just have your timing.
Yep.
But we have newer people on our team, and the last couple of years with COVID overflow, so to speak, have been a little bit harder. But we would like to get back to, in the past we were able to do graduations without calling commands because we had done them in the same locations so many times. They're identical, and so you just know that the other person is going to take this many steps, press this point on the floor, and turn.
Okay, that's very cool.
Yeah.
It probably requires a significant amount of familiarity and practice.
Yeah, and trust, right?
team.
Like I have to trust that the person ahead of me is going to stop where I think they're going to stop, so that then I can stop without bumping into them.
Right.
And then I can turn, and we all turn together.
Okay.
Yeah.
How often do you practice together?
Well, probably idealistically, we'd be practicing roughly every other month. We've had some gaps in the last couple of years since we last took on the last class of new people joining us.
Yeah.
But idealistically, we'd be practicing every other month. Today, we did some practice before graduation. So 3 officers actually worked the graduation, but other people practiced beforehand on site.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any, so you have the standard things that you participate in. Are there any unique things that you've had the pleasure of presenting for?
Yeah, so, I mean, you and I before this talked about one, but I also was thinking of another that really touches my heart. So several years ago, the Special Olympics had reached out to us, Special Olympics Vermont.
Okay.
And so we've done several of their events in St. Albans, at UVM, in other locations, but we've done the opening ceremony for that. And then after we've done the opening ceremony, when they are presenting the athletes with medals, we're draping the medals on the athletes.
Oh, very cool.
And you sign up for things. This is my job or part of my job. I really like it. But then sometimes you're like, okay, I got to get to this event. But being with those athletes was like probably number one in my career. Like really just touching that, how appreciative they were there of us being there, and how excited they were to participate in the athletic events. We were there for unified bocce, which I'd never seen before.
Sure.
So that was pretty neat to do.
Okay.
But probably up there too was what I had talked to you about before. Was one of our members had made contact with Fenway, and so several years ago we were able to go and be out behind second base in center field at Fenway. No offense to anybody who's a Red Sox fan, but like, I think it was just like pretty neat, no matter what sports you're fans of, or if you're not a fan of sports, but like just to be out there, because it's immense. Like the size is just like wild.
You said like Fenway, it's like over 30,000 people or seats.
Yeah, and then think about how big the field is and the surrounding parts of the field. But we had done all this practice and preparation because all eyes are on, TV is on, pictures are being taken, and all of this. So we arrive at the hotel the night before. We're practicing over and over and over again in the parking lot, and then we get to Fenway, and we're all excited, and we're practicing, and then we're in this long hallway that's under the seats.
Right.
So then we're going to go out on the third baseline, and they're like, by the way, you can't do any facing movements. And for people that don't know facing movements, you're basically turning on your heel and the ball of your foot. So if you were to do that in the grass or the dirt right now, you'd see that there'd be a little divot.
Yes.
And because it's Fenway, they don't want you making any divots in the grass.
Right.
So we went from being able to do facing movements where you're turning like that to having to do step, step, step. So we had to, on the fly, figure out how we were going to do the facing movements, practice what we'd already practiced. And you don't realize how far the third base hole under the stadium is to get out to center field. And then it was incredibly windy out there.
Yeah.
And I'm holding one of the flags, probably the DOC flag because I'm shorter than other people. But I'm holding it, and it's like a sail. Like I'm literally being lifted up. And I was like, okay, I could lose my hat. Now, would I rather lose my hat or break form? And so I broke form and smashed my hat down on my head because I was like, that would be embarrassing.
Sure.
But when we were standing in the hallway, when we stepped out onto the field, it didn't feel like wind. When we got to center field, it was like we were on the lake.
Yeah.
So that was a really neat experience to be able to be there. And then we stayed and watched the game as a team, and that was pretty awesome. So our hope is that when we're able to recruit some more members in the future, that we'll be able to get back to doing larger events that require a larger team.
Absolutely.
We were talking about the flags that we carry. So right now, because our team is smaller, we're just carrying the 3 flags, and then we might have other people marching. But when we had the larger team, we were also able to do use the rifles. We have inoperable rifles that sort of represent, like the non-lethal or the rifles that somebody on perimeter in a facility would have.
I've seen other organizations do that with the rifles and everything. I hadn't seen that with ours, so I didn't know that was a thing.
When we were much larger and we were pre-COVID having more regular practices, because it is, first of all, they're heavier than you realize they are.
Sure.
And then you're trying to practice. It is more difficult to acquire that skill than the flags.
Right.
So. Yeah,
there's a lot of, it's just the angles and the
angles
form
and being
of the
smooth
rifle.
with your hands and all of that. Yes, you have to do that with the flags, but it doesn't have the same impact if you make a slight error. You don't want to drop the rifle.
So how big is the team now?
So we're at about 12 people.
Okay.
Right now. So the goal would be to have several more so that we can do more of these events like Special Olympics. One year we did Lake Monsters game. We did the colors there, so that was pretty cool.
Okay.
So we would like to be able to do more things that sort of celebrate the state of Vermont, show the Department of Corrections in the positive light,
Yes.
and show that it's not all just correctional officer,
Absolutely.
even though that's our primary base of staff, but that there's a lot of things that are neat that you can do as add-ons to whatever your base position is,
Yes.
in terms of special teams. And Honor Guard is one of those.
Absolutely.
And we regularly have people at Corrections graduation, Academy graduation that say, how can I be on that team?
Yep.
Like, how does that work? I might have had prior military, or I did ROTC in high school. I'm interested in doing that.
Yes. Yeah, we've expanded kind of our pathways conversations for cadets coming out of the academy, in which we talk about special teams and becoming a trainer. So I feel like we're really pushing more information. It's like, get good at your job first.
Yep.
That's first and foremost. But
Yeah.
then when you want more and are ready for more, there is more for you to do should you want to do it. So I think that's good. Is there a ideal number of team members?
I don't think there's an ideal number. I think, if we had one more qualified person or 10 more qualified people, we would benefit.
Okay. So there's
Right?
no cap or anything or minimum that you're looking for?
No, but I think, every special team, and I know you've interviewed the other special team leaders.
Yep.
Every special team has sort of like what type of characteristics, what kind of officer are they looking for? And we were talking about being in funeral homes. And so we're looking for people who can literally read the room and know, how do I blend in? How do I help this family? How do I step into the shadows, or how do I step forward and offer something to somebody? So it is something different. It isn't just come and do robot drill and ceremony.
Right.
That sometimes the families want to engage with us. Sometimes we have to figure out where to be, because this is the first time they're making this decision relative to us.
Right.
So we're like offering, like, we've scouted the room or the building or the site, and we're going to stand here. What do you think about that?
Yes.
And
you're representing not only the department, you're like for a funeral, for example, you're representing that person's experience with the department.
That's right.
And the department's appreciation for that service.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of put yourself in a position where I'm here for the family, but I don't want to be a distraction.
Correct.
To the experience. So it's probably a little bit of trying to figure out where you fit in that puzzle every time.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense.
So you're looking for somebody who knows that, when is the right time to be smiling, happy, and cordial with your colleagues, and the time to be quiet, and find that balance.
Okay.
Because also, if someone's passed and they're still a department employee, there's going to be a lot of active department employees, people who worked with them, that are looking to socialize with you, and so you're trying to find that balance. Like, how do I keep my role, but also engage with people?
Right. Yes.
It's a little bit different. We're not robots or mannequins.
Yes. And like you said, like, there's people that you probably know also that feel comfortable approaching you, even sometimes when it's not the most appropriate time.
Yeah, and sometimes we're also acting as guides of some sort, even if it's, that's over here, or you can put that there, or helping somebody to their seat in some way, We're in the helping field.
Okay. Very cool. So, all right, we've kind of talked about what you do. If someone is interested in, because you said, like, people come up to you and they ask, how do I join this team? What does the what's the beginning of that selection process look like?
Yeah, so I would be sending out an email like the other special teams with an application. We're looking for somebody that's a genuine interest in doing this work.
Yep.
I'm happy to have a conversation with a person over the phone or email. We want somebody who just doesn't want to build their resume. We're not here for that.
Right.
So we're looking for somebody who has an interest in giving to the department, giving to their peers in this way. So they fill out their application. Their superintendent or district manager signs off on it, which means that the person's in good standing.
Yep.
Right? So to your point earlier about learn your base job,
Yep.
then come to us, because this will be on top of that.
Yes.
Right? So can you maintain that? Are you able to negotiate, hey, I have this event in a month, and work with the schedule person? Every facility is a little bit different about how they do scheduling, but the expectation is you try to get yourself off the schedule because you're serving the department in a different way. And so you have to be willing to do that. Some people struggle because at different times our scheduling is difficult. And so people don't want to feel like they're walking away from their coworkers, but it's really, in some ways, you're stepping up for someone.
Right, representing the department and the individual who had an experience within the department.
Yeah, exactly. So after you have your application signed off on, it comes to me, and then we do group interviews where we try to get a sense of someone. And then we also run, while the interviews are going on, we'll run people through basic drill and ceremony to see, is somebody coachable? Do they have an aptitude for this? Do they have an interest? How is their professionalism while this process is going on? So we're all together for several hours while the interviews are being conducted. Okay. And the whole thing is an interview.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just when you're sitting and I'm reading you the questions from a piece of paper.
Right.
Or what did you write on the piece of paper you sent me? But also, how do you conduct yourself while we're in a learning environment? How would you conduct yourself? I could translate that to how you might conduct yourself on site, at a call.
Absolutely.
Whether it's graduation, which is one type of event, or a funeral, which is another.
Yes. Okay. So, and you said once they're selected, you try and get together once every other month.
Yep.
At a minimum.
Yep. And
do kind of more drill and ceremony and practice that aspect of things and working together.
Yeah, and we try in an ideal world, like today we had graduation, so people are then seeing, well, how does this all work? Right? They get to see the actual environment. And when I first came on the team, we did a lot of neat things like going to funeral homes to practice in a space that might be like a space we're deployed. Right. And people also have to be comfortable in that environment.
Yes.
Some people might have had certain experiences that mean that that's not a place that they want to go. And this might not be the right team for that person. So, everybody has to make a decision for themselves. But we do try to do a lot of practicing. It's also policing each other's uniform.
Oh, absolutely.
To make sure, are everything buttoned correctly? Is there scuff here, a thread there?
Right.
Just to say, we're trying to present our best collective selves.
Is there anything someone can do in preparation? Like we talked about, do your day-to-day, right? And then you measure their professionalism in certain circumstances and how they present themselves overall.
Yeah.
Are there things that people can do outside of those things that set them up for success for either getting on the team or while they're on the team?
Well, in theory, not in theory, but your superintendent or district manager is signing off. But also we have eyes and ears everywhere. So how do you conduct yourself at work on a day-to-day basis? You might receive a satisfactory or higher rating on your evaluation. You might be getting good feedback. But what would your peers say about you?
Okay.
Right? So we want to know that day in and day out, you have the integrity and the honesty and the professionalism.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you see a disparity with people with a history of, like you mentioned, ROTC and stuff like that, with those experiences? Like, have you noticed a little bit of they got a little hands up just because they have an experience in doing uniform movements?
I think it's not foreign to them, so that part, it's not nerve-wracking. Sure. I think when you're learning something, it's like if I'm trying to teach you to do the salsa, right? If you haven't danced before, you're like, well, what do I look like? Do I look silly? Am I doing it right?
Right.
So I think people who have had that experience, but, we have, we're not the Army. We're not an actual military branch.
Right.
And so we're trying to fit ourselves in, and it's, I use the phrase make something ceremonial. There are a lot of times where we're route stepping, which is basically uneven ground, angles, working around a chair. We had another place where we couldn't put the flags up because the drop ceiling was too low. So things that might not be a factor in other locations for a military ceremony that would be out in the open or a big auditorium, to accommodate a lot of people. We've been in chapels, which are very small. So
yes.
I think what's hard sometimes is when we're not strictly following a manual. So some people are like, well, that's not how we did it, or two branches disagree about for example, which way your hand is tilted when you're saluting.
Yeah.
Right. And so that sometimes it's almost the unlearning.
Yes.
And I think,
absolutely.
In anything that you've learned at a different job, you have to unlearn a little bit to relearn how we're all going to do it together.
Okay. And so even with that being said, that familiarity can be beneficial. However, people with zero experience in any of those things, depending on coordination and,
Correct.
You got to know left from right when you were talking about facing movements and things like that, right? As long as you have a general understanding of some of the concepts, the adjustments are doable to make you someone who can fit into the system.
And that goes to are you coachable?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, that is something that, are you willing for someone to critique you, to say, when I said the preparatory command, you dipped forward. You need to hold your body until we all move together.
Right.
If people can take that criticism, you kind of have to have a bit of tough skin, because we're all trying to do it together. It's not that you're bad and I'm good. It's just we're trying to do it together, and this is the count.
Yeah. It's pretty, having done some drill and ceremony, it's pretty clear on what a lot of those expectations are. Like you said, you have to modify some things to fit into your environment.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff, that's pretty structured to the point where, as long as you can understand that structure, it's very, very doable. Yeah.
And we've had practices where there's a reflection in the glass on a window or door, and we can show people, try different ways of learning, or taking pictures. But I think, just trying to get people to be open to that. And also if I'm having you do the calls and you're saying all the facing movements and telling the team what to do, you're learning it in a different way, because you have to anticipate, well, what is the next thing we're doing? Not, I'm just waiting to be told what to do.
Yes.
And I think helps people, the whole, give a fish, teach to fish kind of thing. Yeah. It's you're moving them from waiting for something to be given something, the command, to now what should happen here.
Which just creates an overall better understanding of what the entire process looks like from the other side, and helps them when they're being told to kind of see where that other person's mind is.
Also, we've practiced enough that even if someone said something totally ridiculous, we would know it's actually just the next move, which we all agreed this is what we were doing. In any situation, we try to be earlier than early in order to practice a lot, to gain familiarity with where we're going to be, to where do we stage our gear, to what, meeting in with a funeral director or the point person, the officer in charge.
Sure.
Sometimes we are working in, the person might have been in the military, and so we might be working with another honor guard or the Foreign Legion or VFW or some other, there might be a bugler there. You never know.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out where do we fall in all of this and how do we complement it. And again, always going back to, I'm recognizing that person. We are recognizing that person's service.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. That's awesome information. I hope that people who are interested make sure that they reach out and get to know more information. Hopefully, this is helpful to those people.
Well, you had asked about, I think, somewhere in here in my cheat sheet, about how we get deployed.
Yes.
Right. So where there's call outs. So often we will get a heads up, that if it's an impromptu event, someone has passed, usually while that process of the commissioner approving it, and then someone, usually either the superintendent or a person at the facility that was close with that individual, may be in contact with their family, we're staging, we're saying, okay, there's someone has passed away, please be aware, we may do a service, and then we're sending out draft of what might be happening to then be able to be prepared for what service is coming up. So usually it's a lot of back and forth to figure out all of the pieces, but that's typically it's email that then gets sent out.
Okay.
And
I guess that prompts another question. Are you statewide? Is the whole team statewide, or does it become regional at some point?
When we were bigger, we tried to do regional, but it doesn't always match up because maybe all of the activities happen to be in the northern or northeastern section of the state. So we are one team. We do events all over the place. I did a service that was in Bellows Falls a couple months ago on the same day that somebody was doing graduation in Lyndonville, and the people that were deployed, we lived in Chittenden County and we were going to Bellows Falls, and the people that were doing graduation live in the Northeast. Yep. So we did try to divide it so we weren't making people drive to a different area and then we drive to where they live.
Right.
So if we're able, we try to deploy that way. But sometimes people are saying, I actually worked with that officer. I'd like to be at that service.
Okay.
And
yeah, I'm sure that does happen.
People step up to say, it's important me to recognize that person's service,
Okay. Represent the facility in which they were from, or all sorts of reasons.
Exactly. Or we went to the academy together, or they were my previous supervisor, a lot of different things. So, or I know their family somehow.
Yes.
Right. Even if I didn't know them.
Right.
Vermont is still a small state in the grand scheme of things, and so there's all this interconnectedness that happens.
Yep. And the department isn't very big either. So there is probably a lot of people that know someone who had that previous corrections experience that might be involved in the team.
Yeah. So, I think, again, sort of going back to the deployed part, after the DM or superintendent gets it cleared by the commissioner to go to that service, then I'm the contact person. Right.
Okay.
So people could reach out to me if they have questions. I always think it's better to have that kind, familiar voice on the phone. So if it can be someone from the facility or field site, if it's an active employee or a person who recently retired, somebody that knows the family to be the go-between. And I think people are afraid to say the wrong thing or represent what we do incorrectly, but we'll be there.
Right.
And one of the things I don't think we've talked about is that we honor guard fly, if we've learned of someone's passing, and we'll be working that funeral detail of some sort or celebration of life, we fly a flag over the State House. So there's a state of Vermont flag, not the DOC flag, that flies over the State House, and it has a identification number, and we fly that, and then there's a certificate that goes along with that goes on a plaque, and we're able to present that to their family that recognizes that basically the dedication on the certificate says in recognition of their service to the state of Vermont. And it has their dates of service on there. And so they get a state of Vermont flag to be in their home. Okay.
That's very cool. I didn't know that, actually. So that's some very interesting information that I'm glad you brought up. It did prompt me to wonder, what's the traveling policy as far as, because when we talk about, a lot of people retire and move to somewhere,
We haven't had any requests for someone that's retired and moved and isn't returning here, so to speak. We certainly have had services that have been, we've had officers that live on a border location, and so we have done services in New York, gone over. And then as our team staffing allows, we have sent officers to represent our department when an officer is killed in the line of duty in corrections in another state. So we've had team members that have flown to other states to represent, our condolences, the Department of Corrections condolences for the loss of your officer. To show our support. And there were officers that went to a correctional officer event in Toronto as well several years ago. So
that's good.
So we do travel out of state, but we've never done travel for one of our own employees or retired employees.
So there's not regular trips down to Florida for the DOC retired.
No.
All right.
I know.
We wanted to know that.
To the Carolinas only.
Yes.
No,
There's no cutoff.
No,
but there's also not a lot of trips to warmer
and then usually it's
that
the reason that we're learning of it is because the person was still here. Even in some seasonally. And that their service will be held here or they will be buried here.
Which, I'm sure it just makes more sense. If they're retiring from here, they probably have a life and this is where their family's from. So it just seems a little bit more natural, I guess.
So we've been very fortunate. We do the academy graduations. We represent people at their celebration of life, a funeral. We've done rewards recognition, retirement. There's an emergency services memorial that we do annually at the police academy that recognizes people in emergency services who have passed in the line of duty. So we participate in that. And we hope to certainly, when our team expands, be able to do more things like Lake Monsters or Freezing Fun for Families or Special Olympics Vermont.
How often do you reach out for recruitment if it's regular?
Yeah, so we would probably, if it was regular, and again, I say we're like in COVID times because one year became 5 years somehow.
Right.
But we would probably do something either annually or every other year.
Okay.
So I was hoping to do something this year, but it's looking like it might be several months from now. But it goes out to all staff. The email that's making the announcement, and then there's probably more than one email that encourages people to apply. But people are welcome to reach out to me anytime with questions or interest, and ask the questions you did, like how can I improve my ability to get on the team?
Yep.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, whenever your next recruitment cycle is, you get lots of applicants.
Yeah, I hope so too.
And they kind of have a better understanding of what it is that you guys do. All right. Do you have anything else you'd like to discuss?
No, thank you.
All right. Perfect. Yeah, I'm covered. So we will wrap it up. Thank you for participating, and I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Bye.